computer. Okay, hello. Welcome to Francesca Mondanaro. Woohoo. We are with the art of the craft of the art. This is episode two, part two, about exhale. Part one is inhale, go back and look at that. I'm actually going to transfer these videos to the International School of the Voice YouTube page. So you can start looking at it there as well as ISV's Facebook page. But the first episode, we talked about specifics of how to get, there is a specific inhale, how to get it, why it's important. And we're going in a series of what I call the trinity of the technique, inhale, exhale, and then shaping or optimization of the instrument. And so today we're picking up where I left off on the second episode, which is exhale. And just to quickly recap, some of that stuff was about exhale is basically managing air pressure. Uh, and whilst phonating, well, actually, also whilst perhaps not phonating before you've even begun to phonate, but and that air pressure management is how we create what is called legato. And I also talked about how every single instrument this is the goal of every instrument to achieve the same pressure. Keyboardists, pressure in the fingering, pressure in the air pressure management, of course, of brass and woodwinds, string players, all of it. It's about the physics of pressure. Um, I talked about some exercises, one in my studio called the 825, where you inhale over 8 seconds and exhale over 25. I also spoke about how I don't like the blow through the straw technique. I think it's completely ineffective because it creates too high a pressure, air pressure emission rate release, which is not what we want. The goal is to create for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. We're creating that the science of, not that we need to worry about the science, but just for getting it out there's sake and being logical. We want to create a high pressure internal intercostal rate and several other ancillary muscles that assist the ribs. But this is to create the optimal pressure for your individual throat, allowing for those laryngeal muscles and the apparatus itself to have the lowest possible air emission rate flowing through the cords, giving you the liberty to be dilated, to stretch, to do any of the acuti or anything that the voice would require, making the way for the most refined of vocal functions and facilities via the laryngeal nerve. So when we get to it in part three, or maybe a little bit today, we'll see phonation or making sound is both a cognitive and a neurological work, anatomical magic, basically. So that's what that first episode is about. But today, we really need to talk about what is Appoggio. There's literally no better person than Francesca to jam to coffee talk. We don't have coffee. I have
What we talk about the Appoggio.
to coffee talk about Appoggio. I mean, the word appoggiare we use, it's been centuries that singers have been using this type of leaning. It's what the word means, to lean.
To literally mean,
To
yes.
literally lean,
Right.
okay? We translate that into English as support. I'm not crazy about the English verb support, only because for
What does it
me, it's
mean?
just me. I mean, if you like it, great, use it. For me, it gives the concept of a thisness
Mm,
or holding something.
right.
I don't know. And and it feels different to me as a maker of sound than
hmm
what support means to me.
Right.
Um, matters not. So I rarely use the word support in my studio. Also, I was taught using the word support by several
Mm,
teachers over the years. I quit studying voice with people maybe 15 years ago or maybe more, something like that.
mhm.
Um, and I never felt like the word support made any damned
Sense to you.
sense.
Yeah.
I mean, like conceptually, I get it,
Right.
but the application of it was always like, well, what do I do? What do you mean?
What does
What
that
am I
actually
supporting?
mean? When somebody's
Support the
screaming in
sound.
your face,
Okay.
you're not supporting, and you're thinking to yourself, what does that actually mean? What am I
What does that
supposed to do?
actually mean?
Right.
I get that you want me to support the sound. I get that the air needs to be steady. I get that the tone needs to be the same. And through steady air, tone is the same, and I
Right.
have more control over what I want to do with the instrument, yada yada. But how do I do that?
Right.
So I felt like I never got that answer.
Not, never got the specific mechanics of
The
what
specific
exactly
mechanics, I
toning
would
and
get
how.
pieces of
Yes.
concepts that I would paste together, but it was
Hmm.
really in my own work that I
That you figured it
finally
out.
discovered it. And I
Mm.
discovered it through this is maybe another, you know, chat that's just,
Yes.
you know,
Another
us
conversation kind of
jamming.
thing. Mm.
But it was really through, I found it through resonance. There was like one note in my voice. And I will give this
Which
to,
happens often, as a teacher. I don't know if you've experienced
yes,
this.
yes,
When
yes,
I'm trying to lead a child to the promised land
right,
without giving them the whole TED talk so that they don't get overwhelmed,
right,
at some point at some area of their registration, their body organically, naturally kicks in.
right. And I
And
will give
then,
this to my ex, okay? My ex-husband. Please don't be offended. But if he's listening, which he may at some point, but I will give him this. He
mm,
heard one note in my voice. It was an E vowel on a
mm-hmm,
C, the C on the treble clef staff.
yeah,
And that was like the only note. I was maybe 26 or so, 27,
yeah,
that I could sing without fucking up. Sorry,
right,
language. I could sing that note I without any, it was always, it always sat, as my first teacher would
yes,
say. He was a baritone, Philip Fromeyer. He was like,
mm-hmm,
that was the one note that sat in my instrument without any, constriction. I could
yes,
sing an E on that one note and my throat would be completely liberated. So from there, I
mm-hmm,
began to build out, okay, well, what is making that possible? And I felt like when it happened, like, oh my God, why didn't I know this for so
yes,
long? Why did
yes,
anyone say that my ribs were at their apex? The breath had been incited in its lowest lower
mm-hmm,
lumbar, meaning the ribs were fully expanded and they
expanded, yeah,
were at their apex, but in a way
yes,
that was not yet
rigid, yes, exactly,
right. And then I was able to emit sound, and then I just rinsed and repeated, and lo and behold,
yes,
OMG, I have
right,
air pressure management. And
yeah,
that's when I really began writing about technique and became very, very into it. So
mhm,
let me ask you
yes,
to go any direction you want about
okay,
Appoggio, whether
sure.
how to teach it, what it is, your thoughts on it.
So, I mean, the miniature version of my TED talk is I went through something very similar from the opposite way, which is fascinating, which is why I love our nerding out talks, because as sopranos we were sort of at opposite ends
Right,
of the Fox spectrum, right?
right.
And so for me, my voice would kick in the middle, and then at the pre-passaggio it didn't know what to do. And I went through most of my years in at the Curtis Institute of Music with pitch problems. And I would have people tell me, support, support, you need to support, 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 support. And I didn't know what that meant. Looking back now in 2020 hindsight, I think what the danger of talking, even if somebody was to say lean, lean, lean more, lean, lean, and it
Here.
doesn't feel good to sing, and you have somebody important screaming in your face, what are you going to do? 99 times out of 100, you're going to push.
Yeah, you
You're
got
going
to
to do the
squeeze in some
opposite.
way
You're
and
going to do
push
the
more air.
opposite of what Appoggio actually is. Appoggio with your voce inhalare at the same time, which is, maybe like
Also,
a
let
subset
me
of that
just
conversation.
pause you for a second.
Yeah.
And they don't, they never understood what it was anyway.
Yes.
Otherwise, they would have told you A.
Otherwise, they would have told
B,
you. Yeah.
but B, it's the opposite of what you were creating.
Yes.
And they kept, insisting on
Feeding you in.
that.
Exactly. Right. So, so with that said, when somebody comes in to my studio, specifically with a body that's very overly decompressed, the body's lazy, flaccid. They are the opposite of the singer that comes in that's completely physically rigid. And I talked to them about what Appoggio is. Okay, so this I was taught by the teachers who really knew what they were talking about, some of my teaching mentors, and I found it to be my own case physically in the way that I have sung, and it's worked for the singers that I'm the right teacher for. It works. So Appoggiare specifically for me pertains to the engagement of the pectoral muscles and the tendons that connect right to the middle of the thoracic cavity, right? So when all of those Italian grandmas and grandpas would be like, you need to cry into the sound, when you physically think of having a good, like wet, snotty, dramatic cry, I like to say like the Sicilian widow at the funeral cry, or I actually more than one student has heard me say my Jewish grandmother Mildred lived to be 101, and I say it's like the grandma Mildred groan. Oy, 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 boy, right? Sometimes that gets them going. The Mildred cry or the Sicilian widow cry. There is actually an engagement and a resistance in these muscles. Depending on the singer, what I've noticed is some people will feel an actual pull, like an east-west pull. Some of them will feel the engagement, and then they feel while these muscles are pulling that there's an actual sinking in. To me, what that denotes is that there's a flexibility in the pulling, right? So that's what's happening in the front of the body, right here, right at the center of the breastbone. To me,
Mhm.
those are the muscles of appoggiare. Then you have the secondary muscles, which I consider part of the voce inhalare, which are the intercostals, which basically wrap around your ribs, and those pull as well. And when you go to onset, they keep pulling. It's
You're talking
the
about external or internal intercostal muscles.
the inner intercostals, yeah.
Okay.
And so for me, what it means is specifically several things. One, when you are in appoggiare, what it helps you, speaking of this, like this air pressure, right, and air management, it keeps the pressure away the fancy term is right subglottal pressure, okay, but we can all read that in the manual. It doesn't make us smarter than anybody else. Just means that all of that airflow or air pressure under the cords is sort of kept back so that the cords have a chance to just close, to stay closed, right? So it's this kind of, the most important thing to me is that it is not a rigid, fixed thing. It's not like going to the gym and like doing a bicep crunch and then you're fully contracted and you lock. You're somewhere in the taffy pull of the tendons and the muscles pulling at all times. So, sort of to reinforce with my own language what you had said in part one of this discussion, the body is deeply engaged and flexible at the same time. And I think that's the part sometimes that can take a long time, longer than you would think. Like the brain gets it, but it takes time for the body to get used to what that feels like, if that makes any sense.
So I'm going to actually do this exercise and just
Mm,
as an example, um, that we do an 8-second inhale often
mm,
in the studio.
Okay.
And a 25-second release, which I'm doing now as I speak.
Mm-hmm.
This is allowing, this means the air, in order to achieve this, the
Mm-hmm.
air is flowing
Right.
at its lowest pressure
Mm-hmm.
emission rate. Okay. Which is this hyper slow release,
Mm-hmm.
which feels, and in order to have that kind of contraction,
Mm.
the internal intercostal muscles, external as well, have to be quite developed
They
in
have
order to
to
do
be,
that. It's
they have to be
no different
super
than
developed.
taking,
Yeah.
right, it's no different than taking the dumbbell and pulling it here, but it's this part, the
And
slow,
it takes 25 seconds to do yes, exactly.
right.
Yeah. It takes
That's
25 seconds to
the
release the muscle. Yeah.
physical effort of it. So
Yes.
we do that a lot. And what's fascinating to me is how many of my students don't actually obey it.
Mm-hmm.
It's because they may find it boring because it forces you to stay in 100% executive function,
Yes.
meditative mode.
Mm-hmm.
It may feel boring to them because, you know, like the kids that want to get the black belt and like, you know, break the board right away. They just want to
Yes.
break the effing board.
They want to get the bells
I
and
just want to
whistles
sing. Okay,
first.
whatever.
Yes.
I have a
It's
competition.
not it's not sexy. I say I know this isn't very sexy work.
It's
It's
not sexy,
really
so
it's
sorry.
not sexy at all.
But
You're washing the dishes, you're doing the laundry, it's gotta get done. You gotta
it's got
do
to
it.
get done, and
What am I
that's
gonna tell you?
you have to
Yeah,
build that,
you have to
and
build
that
it.
takes
Yes.
consciousness.
Yes.
That's a TED Talk, but the conscious work of realizing and why 8 seconds. It's just a random number that I picked, but I found
Mhm.
that six was too little. Most
Interesting.
people draw in too much too soon, which is too high.
Right.
If you have to breathe over 8 seconds, you're going to need to start at the lower lobe of the lungs or you won't make it to eight.
That's so fascinating. For me, I guess I'm always thinking through the filter of the individuality and the uniqueness of each singer.
Yeah,
So there are some singers that need help just finding where the low breath is, number one,
I'm going
which
to
I
say
think we talked about a little
that's
bit
got to
before.
be 80% right there.
That's it right there. There are some singers who tank too much when they're breathing in, but
Talk
then when they
about
go,
that for a second. What does that mean?
to me, it means that you're actually taking in too much air and you're exaggerating your intake, which means that you're going to end up blowing. In other words, you're already muscling, you're
Yes.
using muscles that you don't need and creating tension, usually somewhere around the jaw or the tongue, in my teaching
Well,
experience,
okay, yes.
because
We're
they're
gonna,
mistaking that for the low breath, right?
yes. Can we just hold on? That this is going back to inhale, but
That
of
goes
course,
back to inhale,
you
yeah.
need the
And it
both.
sets you up for your exhale, right?
Right. This is, I think, incredibly common.
Yeah.
And um, it's a
And
forced inhale. It's
yeah,
and it has nothing to do, first of all, if you're listening to this, go back to video one
yeah.
and listen to what we were talking about with that. Because I'm not gonna repeat that now, but yes, or they use
Mm-hmm.
any of
Yeah.
those, and we've not, and
Yeah.
actually what has happened, and if you haven't gotten the spine right and the pelvis is out of alignment, which
Right.
usually it is at that point, you've actually the ribs are here,
Yeah.
and so there's only one possible breath, either upper thoracic or clavicular, and which is any of those breaths actually close the larynx slightly,
Yes, exactly. It narrows the vocal tract.
so you
And
start
so,
upside
yeah.
down.
And so what happens is, um, when it comes to the actual exhale, as you were also saying in part one,
No.
Exhale, it's the flexibility of the exhale that makes the onset. If you're already over muscled breathing in, you're going to be over muscled breathing out. And I think what happens is this work is boring and it takes time. Why? Because I've also noticed that singers, in looking for the feeling, they'll get it, they'll have the breakthrough in the lesson. And then because it's new, it's not consistent. And what very often happens is, in looking for the lean and looking for appoggiare, they won't get low enough when they try to do it by themselves. And they'll either, this is my experience, I know everybody in their own studio is different, they'll start adding too much weight in the vocal cords.
What do you mean by adding too much weight?
They'll be too heavy with their own instrument. Ugh. Right? When we're looking
Meaning,
for
let me
too
go deeper with
too
you. Let me
thick
go
and
deeper.
meaty of the chords, like they're using too much chord thickness on their onset.
How would you anatomically do that?
When people overuse the idea of the glottal for the onset, which I, in my humble opinion, I do not feel is the healthiest choice. I
I
know.
think it's shit. I won't say humble. I think it's junk. And it's
I'm
called
just trying to not
ingolato.
get I'm just trying to not get shivved on my way home, because I know that people feel very, I'd like to live to see my 60th birthday. Thank you very much. So
But
because
you know me, you know I'm mouthy, you know. You know I'm mouthy like that.
you use your
Okay.
outside voice. You use
But
your outside voice, and you're braver than me. But it just, anybody that's come to me in my studio who has come from that practice, there's usually a wobble.
oh, there
There's
has to be. There's
there's a beat in the vibrato that's not naturally theirs, all that kind of stuff.
of course
And it's
this
because something
yes.
is, like you said, it's not on the air. The onset is not made with the air going through the chords. It's made by grabbing. It's made by a laryngeal grab and
So if you
no.
look at an anatomical, in my studio, I have all these really boring ENT. They're not boring to me. I'm going to stop saying that. They're
I
awesome.
know we
Okay.
should start apologizing
It's like an
for
ENT office in there.
our vocal pedagogy nerd flags.
I know I got them all over, and I point to them, and they all have. I let my students name them, so
Yes,
each student has a new name for my different people, my
that's
different
fabulous.
posters in the room, and I'm like, so Christoph is this year's name for the dude who's turned to the side, and we're looking at
Yes,
his entire vocal anatomy. So
yes.
Christoph in my studio is showing an exhale position, right, with this space of
Hmm.
the pharynx, right, and this
Yes,
hyoid muscle not pushing. So
yes.
I always say, okay, you see that little epiglottal situation right there, right?
Hmm.
And your pharynx is, okay, this is the real mouth of the singer, Dice Garcia, right? I didn't say it.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
So there's your mouth, okay? Now imagine if you press, this part of the tongue is made for language, right? So
Hmm.
imagine if you're pressing with the tongue and it would require hyoid muscle,
Right.
chin muscle work as well. Okay,
Hmm.
because the way that muscle contracts is it contracts inward,
Yeah.
combined with the tongue muscle, which contracts downward, and
Right.
connected to it is the laryngeal tissue.
Right.
Right about here are the vocal folds. So, what
Hmm.
happens if you squeeze this? It's gonna shut the vocal folds, squeeze the
Yeah.
larynx shut. And why is that important anatomically? Because when you swallow liquids foods, it
Hmm.
shuts off the trachea area
Right.
so that we don't die when we try
It's
to have a sip of coffee.
yeah.
So you're using throat closing muscles to try to start sound. Throat
Right.
closing muscles stop trachea behavior.
Yes. What's Yes,
Yeah.
I think what can be very challenging as a teacher is that when you have somebody, I don't know if this has been your experience, but it's happened to me several times. Now that I've been around for half a minute, there are these sort of like trends that I sort of see wafting through the studio. When I get somebody who's come from a place of, speaking of the exhale, so speaking of their onset on their exhale being overly muscled and narrowed, in their inner ear, it makes
Mm.
an impressive sound.
Ah,
And they mistake that for what we hear out here.
that's right.
Trying to get a singer who's going by impressing themselves with their own sound to,
Ooh,
to, to release
Jesus. Boom.
to release into what it feels like instead of what it sounds like. That is a sticky wicket. It takes somebody. Okay,
Oh,
I'm
can
gonna
I get a
add.
witness? This is a major church moment.
Yeah, and it's
Woo! Amen.
this is where I find out who really wants to sing and who doesn't,
She said it. You heard it right here.
because
Francesca Mondanaro said it.
they have to let go of their ego and impressing themselves,
Oh, 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 oh. I need a
and
dance.
they
I
have to
need a
go
dance.
by what it feels like, and they have to record their own instrument, and they have to listen to the acoustical after effects. If I had a dollar for
This,
everybody that was like, I don't know, it sounds a little wimpy, is it gonna carry, I could retire tomorrow,
right?
right? I even went through that as a
Sounds so
singer.
thin.
Yeah.
It sounds so, or the other when they're used to holding
Yes.
it open. Oh, it's too, it's too covered, they'll say. I
Yes.
love it when they use coperto wrong. I said, oh,
Yes.
you think it's ingolato is what you think.
Right. And meanwhile, your ears are literally gonna, like, you're gonna get tinnitus from like how many singer partials are actually out in the space where they're supposed to be by
Yeah,
your
yeah,
audience, right?
yeah.
So
The
that's,
ego.
oof.
Mm,
I think sometimes
mm,
it's ego, and then I mean, but also ego is wrapped up in insecurity, right?
mm. I'm
So
I'm just noising now because words aren't enough. If I were an aria, this would be cadential because we've left the land of words and there's only
yeah,
ohs.
it takes, so you have to be willing to trust, but you have to be humble enough to just try and do the work. But one of the, it's so, and I'm like,
Humble.
speaking of Minnie, we called her Minnie, my grandma, my Jewish grandmother, because she was Minnie. She was like 4'11" and her gold lame, like
These are my
witch
people.
angles.
These are my people.
But one of the reasons why I like working open studio, where like there are no secrets, everybody's welcome to come and like
Yeah,
sit in on on other people's lessons, especially if the same voice type, blah blah blah. One of the greatest tools is, who am I, chop liver, don't mind me, I'm just a teacher that you're paying, sitting here. Don't believe me, believe the other three people in your lesson who know your voice and are all going, oh my God, what is
yeah,
that sound that's coming out of your face now when you're looking at me like I'm an idiot? Like,
right.
that's, don't believe me. Don't listen to the, chubby Jewish Italian lady in the corner of the room. Listen to everybody else. They're a lot cooler than me,
Yeah,
but they also know, you know what I mean? And
yeah,
that's hard, I think, sometimes for people, but it has to be done, because the other way is going to be impressive in your ear, but you're not going to last. You're going to grind down your own instrument.
of course.
There will be a very high price to pay. So
It
this
doesn't
idea,
work. You
it
don't
doesn't
have
work.
access to the complete facility of the
Yes.
instrument. You do not, for sure, have
No.
access to your artistic intellect. Oh,
No.
that'll never work. You don't have access to
No.
your artistic intellect.
No,
Okay?
you can't express anything on a limited instrument. It's like asking a painter to look at all of their colors and then throw half of them away or most of them away. And no
Yes,
matter what you're feeling
exact.
or how you want to express yourself, you can only use this one or two colors. Then you're not being an artist, right?
That is the goal to not only what I'm teaching, but what I'm
Yes.
writing about and what this podcast, this vlog, whatever you want to call
Yeah.
it, is eventually we want to get past some of the technical talk so that we can start talking about
The
why the
art
technique
making.
and
Yeah.
how it serves art making and how we
Exactly.
must make a revolution about
Yes.
how we teach, how we talk about it, how we perform it, how we live it, so that we are not only continuing the legacy of this form that we love so much,
Yes.
but we're also helping it to advance.
Yes.
and change. And where are we going? I don't know, but
Exactly.
it cannot do those things
Yes.
if we don't talk about this. So just to square it up a minute, just to recap, the we need Appoggio to be encapsulated. So,
Yes.
in short, Appoggio is that action. It's an action.
It's the physical muscular action.
It's a physical muscular action that is managing the release of the air or the air pressure
Yes.
emission
Yes.
rate over
Yes.
the cords.
Over the
Okay?
cords.
We can
Exactly.
talk a whole lot about it. We can demonstrate, but you can find us in a studio or in a course and go further.
Exactly.
But that's basically what it is.
That's
Um,
exactly what it is.
and if you're not seeking it, uh, you're not going to get to the complete ability to
You
A,
won't even be able, you won't
what
even
the
be singing
instrument
with
can
an,
do.
no, you won't even be singing with an open throat.
No. So, and of course, if you don't have that, you don't have the complete ability to use whatever is possible in your genetic,
For you, for what you were
right?
born to express.
And
Yes.
then B, you won't be able to completely express any artistic
No.
conjurings
No.
and intellect into the singing,
No.
which is completely effing pointless and is the reason that I barely go see singing.
You said it.
She said it again. She said it again.
She
I just
used the
can't.
outside voice. I'm a
It,
Brooklyn chick and you're braver than me. I wouldn't
well,
want to fight. I wouldn't want to meet you in a dark
but
alleyway with a
I found out, I told you once that when I was pregnant with my second, I was an old lady. They call it geriatric pregnancy after 36. I was 39. And they
oh
do all these
Lord.
tests to make sure that, you're not carrying a baby with disorders or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And they ask mom and dad, is either of you Irish or Jewish? Those are the two groups they ask you about, by the way, because those are the ones that typically they have a heavy list of genetic disabilities and markers
Markers.
for
Yeah.
illnesses. So I was like, I'm not really Irish. I'm mostly Scottish English. And they're Sicilian, and my mom's Sicilian.
Mm,
That's all I know. And husband says, oh well, my family is Italian, but there could also be there's a Portuguese, and maybe they're Jewish. So, well, we won't test dad unless mom has any markers, and mom's not
mm.
Jewish or Irish. So, but we do the test anyway. They call me 2 weeks later. By the way, it's Nancy Levine. Nancy, if you ever listen to this, Nancy Levine in Yonkers. Nancy Levine said, Mazel tov, Rachel. You're 25% Jewish. I was like,
You're part of the mishpacha.
I said, what?
You're part of the mishpacha. That explains a
I
lot.
can't, no one in my family knows anything about it. Okay.
No, I know. There you go.
I mean, evangelical Protestant situation over here, and no
You
one
got
knows
a
anything.
tonsilla that's rolling in her grave with the Christian whatever. No, no,
No,
no.
I think it's gotta be that Sicilian situation. Somebody down there, I don't know, Sephardic, I don't know what it is.
Somebody stripped somebody else way back in the day.
So, so she said, we need to now test you for other things because
Oh
you're pretty
Lord.
decently Jewish. So that was a fun discovery. It
Fabulous.
reminded me of that Seinfeld episode, where the dentist converts to Judaism. I don't know if anybody ever saw that, right? My people have suffered.
Yes.
Anyway, yeah. So that's what a poncho is, people.
Yes, it is.
That's what it's
In a
used
nutshell.
for. In a
And
in a
it's intrinsically connected to the voce inhalare muscles, as well as, like you said, the onset happens in the exhale, which is like probably a conversation for another time, because that's another place that singers are really screw themselves up as well. They mistake what that feeling is, and at the point of connection for the onset, they want to do something extra.
Ooh, they do.
But we can talk about that another time.
That's episode 3, people. Episode
Okay.
3 is going to be the shaping optimization of the instrument, but
Yeah.
maybe before that, it's probably going to have 2 parts as well because we have to talk about onset of phonation.
Yes, it's super important.
That is,
And
to
I think
me, I call that currently in my studio. I change the language sometimes. I
Mm,
mean, as I evolve, but I call that like that's the part of the equation where X is. X
mm.
marks the spot. That's the spot where either you're going to screw it up or you're not.
Or you're not, or you're going to have ownership for the rest of the phrase. Yeah, exactly. Or the rest
That
of the
point of okay, I got the low inhale.
yeah.
Now I'm holding and I'm beginning the slowest possible exhale. Here it is. It still feels apex. My
Mm-hmm.
ribs are at their most. I'm doing it right now as I speak. My
Mm-hmm.
throat is completely open and now I'm going to phonate right
Mm-hmm.
now. And in that nothingness is the everythingness.
Yes, that makes
IACT.
perfect sense.
It's like an
Yeah.
old Latin word
It's
for
sort of
it
like
means
the key that unlocks the door to your freedom, basically.
thisness. It's the
Yeah.
thisness. That
Yeah.
nothingness is the thisness, the everythingness of
Yeah.
the on of sound.
I
So
agree.
that would mean that, or it could mean, it's not an
Mm-hmm.
absolute statement what I'm about to say, but it could mean that technique is everything that happens before that moment.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. You have you the way what's going to come out of your face is how you set it up. You either
Right.
set yourself up for success or you set
You
yourself
could
up to
say that
fail.
what happens after at phonation and after is then management of
Yes.
the technique.
Yes,
Could say
absolutely. That
that.
makes perfect sense. Yeah.
So that's, I think that's where we should maybe cap it for today.
Yeah, that's fine.
I think less is more in
Yeah.
these chats.
Yes.
So next time, episode 3 is onset of phonation.
Onset and phonation.
I think
Exactly.
we should demonstrate a little bit.
Okay, we will.
I'm also open to bringing a student eventually
Yes,
and
that's a
having
fabulous
that in
idea, actually.
time and
Yeah.
showing what that looks like in various developmental levels. That's
Yes,
something
I
that
think
could be
that's a
very
fabulous
interesting.
idea, actually.
But in my school, Casta Diva is like our anthem
Hmm.
because there is nothing like that. First of all, that tessitura just fits any female voice,
Mm-hmm.
and the C to the A, the
Mm-hmm.
consonant. Ooh, I can't wait to talk about onset of phonation. Ooh, mama
We
love.
will, we will.
Ooh, I love it.
To be continued.
To be continued. Also, I'm having other guests come on after we finish this section, first section of
Mm-hmm.
technique to talk about other aspects of voice, but from someone who is not necessarily a singer, a coach,
Mm-hmm.
conductors. This is a conversation that must be had. So, just picking up where we were
Yes.
interrupted by Zoom asking
Yes.
for money. Um, yeah, I think that we need to spend time. It'll have to onset a phonation session will have to continue Appoggio into it. They're
Yes.
clearly incredibly connected. They're they're one and the same in a way.
Mm-hmm.
They need each other to exist.
Yes.
So very soon we'll do that. Um, and I just want to say like a super deep thank you. I adore you. I
Thank
love
you.
this.
I adore you too.
And pretty soon we're going to get to a point to where we can start talking about the philosophy
Mm,
technique.
yeah.
Like a lot of those things you mentioned where like the ego self
Yeah.
being out of the way in order to do the work, which
Yes.
also leads to the artistry. Because are you really a creator if
Yeah.
your ego is in it first? I mean, there's ego in it, it can't be completely subtracted, but are you a vessel for what's there
Yes.
to deliver if you are guided by your love of self?
Well, I
You're
mean, harkening back to like
insecure.
the title, yeah, like harkening back to the title that you use, like the craft of the art and the art of the craft. It's like that's the mastery of your craft. What does it really mean to
Mm,
pursue the mastery of a craft? In
mhm.
our language and in our world, we're talking about the supported, unmiked, acoustic voice using our body as our artistic instrument to express something. That's a whole life's calling and a life's journey, and a lot of we get confronted with us, we get confronted with who we are when we're handling our own instruments. I mean, you and I could probably do a whole entire conversation on the difficulty for young singers having to be patient, especially for our singers that are the yaps, like the young
Well,
emerging
because the
artists,
industry is not set up,
because the industry isn't set up for the actual work that needs to get done.
there's no
And yet,
platform for that to live.
right,
There's
and
no space
exactly,
created
yeah,
for the artist to even
right,
be made and encouraged.
right. And so, what does that mean in today's world? If you're really, are you an artist or what is it? That's a whole other, are you patient enough to put in the work to pursue your craft?
And then go around what the industry has given you,
Yes, the rules.
because
Yeah,
what it means is you're you're probably going to want to avoid things. It will naturally You will naturally want to avoid things that don't
right.
feed the truth
Yes.
of you.
Of
And
you,
what does
who you
that
are.
mean for making a career? What
Yes,
does that
exactly.
mean for being an artist? And is an artist someone who is a careerist
Right.
at art making?
We got a lot we can talk about. We got a lot to
Okay. I
expect.
mean, are you still an artist if your painting is not hanging at MoMA?
Well, you know my answer to that, which is of course, but that's for another day.
So,
So,
I bid you adieu.
mwah.
Namaste. Thank you so
Welcome to the
much.
Mishpocha. Welcome.
Hi! I'm so excited to be a part of.
Mazel tov l'chaim, and I will speak to you soon.
Okay, love.
Mwah.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, bye.